Hey everybody, it's time for more Alienated. We're now up to chapter 21. I can't believe we're almost halfway through the book. But before we crack on, a shout out as always. Today's shout out goes to Mustapha. Mustapha, I wanted to give this shout out to you because I know you're a huge fan of Back to the Future, as I am, and I hope you get the reference. There's a gag, a little Easter egg in this chapter, and I hope that you get the joke. So this is chapter 21, Meet the Octos. One night, I followed Octo's tentacle-drawn map to a warehouse 5 blocks from our secret hangar to finally meet his folks. Their home was actually the same size as the hangar, only much newer and shinier. When the massive iron door rumbled open, I half expected to see a stealth bomber inside. But instead, my 20-tentacled friend glided out of the darkness. "Welcome to the aquarium," Octo said. "My folks can't wait to meet you." After the blazing early evening sunshine, the darkness of Octo's pad seemed pitch black, though beautifully cool and air-conditioned. But though my eyes adjusted to the SeaWorld-sized alien aquarium, my brain pretty much refused to. I was surrounded by an enormous U-shaped tank, home to 2 massive venti tents. Octo's mama and papa were as big as killer whales. Octo was a miniature carbon copy of his dad, but his mom had purple tiger stripes instead of yellow, and I think some equivalent of lipstick on her beaks because they were glossy ruby red. Or was it crimson? It was hard to tell with the green hue of the water. Little galaxies of bubbles swirled upwards every time they moved. Somewhat disturbingly, I could hear their hearts beating, rhythmic, pounding, underwater drums. "Mom, Dad," Octo said, "this is Sherman. Sherman, this is my mom, Urta, and my dad, Hank." Octo sat me at the head of the table that was surrounded by the U-shaped tank, and he squatted opposite. Hank and Urta floated in the water beside us, with their tentacles intertwined lovingly. "Good afternoon, sir." "Ma'am," I said. "Thanks for having me over. Oh, and my dad says great work with the recovery in the Pacific." A small orange cuboid robot with telescopic arms hovered out of the darkness and poured cans of Pepsi into the glasses of ice by our plates. "That was an adventure," chuckled Urta. "And romantic," added Octo's dad in a gurgling, baritone-deep voice, which I suddenly realized I could hear from the little loudspeakers on the rim of the aquarium. We spent a few days off the coast of Hawaii after that mission, just the 2 of us. Urta swam towards the glass. "Word in the BAA community is that your father's doing a bang-up job in stationery." Yeah, I said. "I don't think he's loving pushing envelopes." "We all do our bit, Sherman," said Hank. "I suppose you're right," I said, thinking aloud. "All these aliens living here, but doing their best to stop the human race from freaking out at not being the only intelligent species in the universe. I guess it's a lot of work, right? Work that requires deep-sea recovery and a steady stream of stationery." "He's certainly intelligent," said Urta, smiling with all 3 rouged beaks. Octo's dad looked down at Octo at what I could only interpret was an approving nod. "You're right, son," came a bellow from the loudspeaker. "He is smarter than he looks." The top of the tank was completely open, a fluorescent green lagoon. Little waterfalls cascaded from pipes at the corners, and every so often tentacles tips flicked above the surface like a Loch Ness Monster sighting. The Z5 robot served up pizza-sized crispy green leaves on our table, then leaped onto the tank and delivered pincerfuls of the stuff to Hank and Urta. "Let's eat," Octo said. "Deep-fried Fakosian sea moss," Hank said, munching. "We get it imported from the deli on Oahu 3, where we first met. Isn't that right, my lovely?" Urta planted a kiss on Hank's cheek. "When it was just the 2 of us," she said, "and now our little boy is all grown up." She turned to Octo and said, "Oh, how we've missed you." It turned out that he had been home alone, or rather, squiddy-sat, by the robot for a few weeks. Hank and Urta worked with the salvage and rescue division of the Bureau, and they had just helped raise a Centurion mothership from the bottom of the Pacific. "You should have seen it, Sherman," Hank said. "Imagine a skyscraper bursting up from the ocean." "Was anyone on board still alive?" I asked. "That ship is 32,000 years old," said Urta, "so no, dear." But the interesting thing is that about the same time the Centurion's home planet was being destroyed by a geological event, added Hank in a classic dad-knows-best voice. I looked at Octo and mouthed, Ned's? Octo nodded, mouthing, has to be. Think about it, Sherman, Hank continued. The surface of this little world of yours is blue. 70% water. Most of what crashes here ends up on the seabed, and some of it's been there a long, long time. Hank and Erta told some great stories about deep-sea diving, salvaging alien relics, and even rescuing a ship full of teenagers who'd crashed in the Arctic from Zillion 9. But unlike my dad, these two clearly loved their jobs with the Bureau. But never mind all that, Erta declared. What really matters is this sister of yours. Octo's quite besotted. Be what? I teased. Oh, you mean he's totally crushing on that swamp monster I'm forced to live with? Ooh, she's from a swamp, is she? Asked Erta. Good breeding eggs, those swamp monsters, I'll have you know. Octo's yellow stripes turned bright pink, and he rolled his eyes at me. See what you started? His folks giggled with the gentle, teasing laughter of a sitcom family. It was the kind of laugh track that had been absent from the Capote clan since Mom died. Before I could offer extensive insight into the misguidedness of Octo's crush, he managed to steer the conversation back to me. Actually, it's Sherman who's the lovelorn one. He's got it bad for an icon. A deity? Hank gasped. Well, check you right out, Sherman Capote. How progressive. Erta looked impressed. You kids today. Have you asked her out on a date yet? Asked Hank. Octo tentacle slapped me on the back and let out a raucous guffaw. Hank and Erta pressed their beaks against the glass, awaiting more gory details. I'm planning to ask her to the prom, I said, but it's not for 4 weeks. I have time. Hank pointed a tentacle straight at me. Has your brain dried out? An icon expects... Sherman! Erta gasped. You have no time. Hank intertwined his tentacles with Erta's. When I first saw this fine specimen of sea life, do you think I waited 1 minute to ask her to the enchantment under the sea dance? I said, looking to Octo, who shook his head like he'd heard this 1,000 times before. I'm guessing no? Exactly, said Hank. I swept her off her tentacles. Octo put down his sea moss. You know what, buddy? It's true. What if you finally ask Juliet to the prom and she says no? What if someone else asks her first? You need to lay the groundwork now, buckaroo. But you said... I wasn't sure if it was okay to mention the races in front of Octo's folks, so I stopped talking. I just sat there, chewing on the surprisingly delicious alien seaweed. I thought the whole point of this Let's Win the Rocket Races project was that it'd make actually asking Juliet, well, kind of a formality. Because then I'd be cool, right? On the other hand, risking a no from Juliet meant a crushed planet, not just a crushed Capote. Maybe these venti tents were right. I had to man up. There's a double bill at the drive-in on Saturday, Octo said. Show her that you're interested, Hank agreed. You must woo her before asking such a big commitment of her. Think of it as a prelude to the prom, said Octo. A warm-up date. Maybe make it a double date, added Hank. Eh, son? Let's just focus on Sherman's love life, Octo said. But I don't have a car, I said. I can't walk to the drive-in. Octo piped up. Hey, Hank, Sherman can use a Toyota for the drive-in, right? If it's for love, his dad said. Certainly. Okay, I'll ask her, I said. How hard could it be? All right, that's chapter 21 of Alienated. Come back to more for chapter 22. Everybody stay in, stay safe, take care of one another, and I hope you're enjoying the story. Thanks, guys.